Sometimes during the holidays, you're in the mood to watch It's a Wonderful Life for the 100th time. You just need that heartwarming jolt of holiday spirit. And other times, maybe during that weird black hole between the 25th and the 1st that exists for some reason, you're like, God, I would love to watch literally anything else. That's what this video is for. Welcome to 12 Days of Actress, an annual end-of-year series in which I talk about 12 performances I love by 12 different actresses and make my pitch for why you should add them to your watch list. I haven't featured most of these actresses on the channel yet, but I love their work and need to find the excuse to give them their flowers, so here we are. The first iteration of this series, I was like, oh no, let's not pick anything sad or crazy. We may not be watching holiday movies, but let's keep it light. Well, not this year. 2024 was weird, and I programmed this list to match. That's the mood I'm in, unfortunately. So I know these films won't be everyone's cup of tea, but hopefully a few of you out there find something you're interested in or get a chance to revisit some films you already enjoy. Okay, let's get started. If you Google Satan in high heels, you're going to see it described again and again as sexploitation. But I think that term brings an image to mind that doesn't quite describe what this movie is. It's not as risque as all that. It's not softcore porn masquerading as a drama. It's just that it takes place in the bowels of the nightlife industry. The film follows Stacey Kane, played by pinup model Meg Miles. She's a dancer in a cheap carnival who decides to start a new life with money she's stolen from her no-good boyfriend. She escapes to New York City, where she decides to audition as a singer at a nightclub. There, she meets the woman who runs the club, Peppy, played deliciously by Grayson Hall, and the club's owners, Arnold Kenyon and his son, Lawrence. As Stacey embarks on the journey of becoming a quote-unquote legitimate singer, both Kenyon men fall for her. She welcomes their advances, creating an imbalance of power and threatening her prospects as a singer. To be honest, I hadn't seen much of Grayson Hall's work prior to this, although she's mostly remembered, I think, for her role on the show Dark Shadows. I was mostly familiar with her from the film The Night of the Iguana, where she plays a kind of tyrannical, uppity, lesbian-coded school teacher. I always liked her in that film. She's such a sharp, hysterical antagonist, but this film gave me new reasons to appreciate her because it showcases her talents in such a different way. Peppy is anything but sharp and uppity. She's slick and methodical, suave even. She's coded here again, a kind of lesbian Svengali, morphing Stacey into a proper young lady, or at least proper enough to keep up the club's appearances. Through all their banter and Stacey's petulance, her demeanor remains calm and unruffled. If Stacey doesn't follow the rules or steps out of line, no bother. It can't disturb Peppy because she is powerful enough to replace her and competent enough to find the right girl to do it. It's a stellar, supporting performance, a cool counterbalance to Meg Miles' vampy, carefree lead. Another thing to love about this film, its music. This is randomly one of the great underrated film soundtracks, and I can't play any of it here for copyright reasons, but definitely look it up if you like early 60s jazz, Harry Mancini-esque film music. You can watch Satan in Heels right now on MUBI or on YouTube, although I definitely recommend MUBI because the YouTube version is a bit iffy. The streaming quality is also much better than what I'm showing you here. Many of us had a Sandra Huller moment last year after seeing her extraordinary performance in Anatomy of a Fall. I know I did, and had I been able, I would have cast my vote for her for Best Actress. I knew Huller mostly because of Tony Erdmann, which had some light Oscar buzz in the 2016 season, so I used Anatomy of a Fall as an excuse to check out her other films. Requiem, her film debut, actually blew me away. This 2006 film centers on a young woman named Michaela who comes from a very Catholic family. She finally has the opportunity to attend university after a vague medical issue prevented her from attending. She has trouble adjusting to her new environment, but manages to make friends, although her medical troubles begin to reappear. It turns out that Michaela has been suffering from epilepsy. She confesses, however, that she doesn't think it's just epilepsy, that actually she's been hearing the voice of God. Her friends and family try to intervene with psychiatric help and medical resources, but her condition worsens as she insists that God is making her suffer for a reason. By the way, this film was based on a real woman who eventually died from exhaustion and malnutrition after undergoing 67 exorcisms during the year of her death. Part of this film's strength is that it isn't really interested in finger-wagging at religion, nor is it interested in the melodrama and horror we normally associate with films about exorcism. This is nothing like The Exorcist. Mostly, Requiem wants you to care for Michaela, a woman ill-prepared to handle her newfound independence. Are her visions real? Is she simply coping? I don't think this film works without Huller's grounded, human portrayal at its center. She takes on the daunting physical challenge of playing Michaela with such ease. The severe gait of a nervous young woman unlocks as she finds joy in freedom. Yes, this film has one of my favorite tropes: woman in mental health crisis lets loose on the dance floor. Yet she seizes up again in moments of uncertainty, assuming the rigidity of devotion. And then, of course, there's the epilepsy and possession. It's hard to make moments like that feel believable and sympathetic, like a real person actually suffering, and not an exploitative horror bit, but she does it, aided by Requiem's naturalistic cinematography. Maybe I'm letting my biases run away with me here, but I really do think this is one of the most impressive screen debuts of the last 20 years. See it for yourself and let me know what you think. It's currently on YouTube with English subtitles. So I'm going to read you the first few sentences of the New York Times review of All the Fine Young Cannibals, because even though it might dissuade you from watching the film, it also proves my point about how goddamn good Pearl Bailey is in it. Midway through All the Fine Young Cannibals, Pearl Bailey, after belting out a pair of torch songs with enough electricity to jolt the most shock-proof viewer into attention, glances in the general direction of the camera and croaks, "That's the end. I've sung." Audiences would do well to take her sage advice and go home, for Miss Bailey is obviously a woman who speaks with authority. With cool dispatch, she takes a maudlin role as a drunken old blues singer dying of unrequited love, and walks off with whatever honors this dreary drama can bestow. It's 100% true. Pearl Bailey walks away with this film, and her presence alone is worth sitting through it. All the Fine Young Cannibals is that kind of bloated melodrama where like 3 films worth of plot happens in 5 minutes. Pregnancies, suicide attempts, terminal illness, alcoholism, it's all in there. But broadly speaking, it follows an on-again, off-again relationship between Salome, a farm girl, and Chad Bixby, a pastor's son who is obsessed with jazz. I care about this movie insofar as Chad's love of the trumpet brings him into contact with Ruby, Pearl Bailey, a famous singer who's become paralyzed with depression since her lover, coincidentally a trumpeter, left her. Chad's playing jolts her back to life, so to speak, and she begins to help him with his music career. Robert Wagner can't act for shit, which sucks because most of her scenes are with him, but every word Bailey utters carries such depth. She delivers a monologue upon meeting Chad that I'm simply obsessed with. She says she can't sing anymore, but she tells her story, staring off into the distance, falling in and out of song, expressing her grief the only way she knows how. It's absolutely heartrending. This performance adds new dimensions to Bailey, who is so known for her sense of humor. It also gives the film a dramatic heft that it might not otherwise have. It's not an easy film to find, so check the description if you're interested in seeing it for yourself. Kathleen Turner and director Ken Russell are a match made in heaven. Or maybe hell. Depends on your point of view. In Crimes of Passion, maybe both at the same time. Joanna Crane leads a double life. By day, she's a professional, put-together fashion designer. By night, she's a sex worker called China Blue, a kinky showboat who delights in manipulating her clients. A private detective called in for a case of corporate espionage at her day job discovers her secret identity and falls in love with her. They reawaken true passion within each other, although their relationship is complicated by his pending divorce and her double life, particularly the fact that a delightfully impish priest, played by the wonderful Anthony Perkins, has become obsessed with China Blue and plans to murder her with the devil's playthings. Fans of Turner's performance in John Waters' Serial Mom would really enjoy this, I think. Joanna is ultimately not as severe as Beverly Sutphin, but the films have a similar sense of humor and disturbed campiness. I mean, the very first thing she does is deliver a beauty contest acceptance speech while At work. At this point, it's cliche to refer to a very sexual role as brave, but I do think it applies here. She's asked to do some pretty off-the-wall things other leading ladies might shy away from, but it's not provocative just for the sake of it, although Russell does sometimes do that. Crimes of Passion couches its shock in a pretty nuanced arc. Joanna finds safety in control, security in the fantasy of sex work. She fears the dynamics of a conventional relationship while craving the emotional fulfillment of one. This performance works because Turner can do both, be an uninhibited little freak and an emotionally stunted woman trying her best to learn how to love again. I love that contrast and how she breaks down the character's walls. As of posting, this film is currently streaming on the Criterion channel.
A king of comedy was slept on. People hated it when it came out. Pretty much. It wasn't like... No, it was the flop of the year. That's what it was called. On Entertainment Tonight.
The King of Comedy may have been slept on in the 80s, but I am here to defend King Scorsese for a work I find incisive, prescient, and 8,000 times better than recent imitations could ever hope to be. Robert De Niro plays Rupert Pupkin, a delusional stand-up comedian who believes the key to his success lies in Jerry Langford, a late-night host who, in reality, couldn't care less about him. Pupkin meets his match in Masha, another fan of Langford's, who helps him kidnap Langford and hold him hostage in her swanky townhouse, where he demands Langford offer him a slot on the show. It's a very funny film built on delusion and ambition, relationships that never materialize, opportunities missed for the sake of fantasy. It's a tone that requires an unsparing, confident, reckless performance to realize fully, and Sandra Bernhard accomplishes that brilliantly. Bernhard had only been in one film at this point, Cheech and Chong's Nice Dreams, but if you've seen any of her stand-up specials, you'd understand what Scorsese might have seen in her as a 25-year-old comic that would make her perfect for the role. Her bold, wild energy, her fearlessness. She would seem just as at home sparring with De Niro on the street as she would performing a ridiculous charade for Langford as he's tied up in her home. The hostage situation is hilarious in and of itself, as she fawns over the sweater she sewed for Langford and bitterly argues with Rupert over whether or not he can keep it on. But surely, the candlelit dinner is the highlight of this film. While a general outline for the scene existed, she improvised a lot of it, occasionally adding little bits from her act. It's just a deranged stream of consciousness, making herself laugh and putting on airs of seduction she barely understands, let alone wields competently. The King of Comedy is far from a flop, and Sandra Bernhard is one of the major reasons it works. A few years ago, Lincoln Center in New York City was running a series of films directed by Kinyo Tanaka, who you might know as a very famous actress. She was often referred to as the Bette Davis of Japan in the 1950s. And I really wanted to see what she'd made as a director. Ended up loving what I saw and was thrilled when the Criterion Channel did a similar series on her work earlier this year. That's where I caught Girls of the Night, a 1961 film about a sex worker named Kuniko, played by Chisako Hara, who is sent to a reform institution after anti-sex work legislation is passed in Japan. Kuniko tries her best to make a life for herself after she quote-unquote graduates, but once people find out about her past, they treat her really badly and leave her no choice but to resort to old ways. She makes attempt after attempt to live by the book to seemingly no avail. Will she ever meet anyone who sees her for who she is, a good person and a hard worker? It's extremely rare to find a film with as much empathy for sex workers as this one, especially from this time period. Tanaka really takes this taboo to task, condemning Japanese society for failing to care for one of its marginalized communities. But her critique isn't one-dimensional. Yes, the women in the rehabilitation center come to each other's defense, but there are also women who are prejudiced against sex work, who refuse solidarity with their fellow women who are just trying to make it in a man's world. Chisako Hara carries all of this on her back. Kuniko isn't the stereotypical proper ingenue, and those rough edges make her so much more interesting as a character. There's enough tragedy in this story that it'd be tempting to play it as some weary melodrama, But Hara is grounded and hopeful as often as she is discouraged. Her optimism gives the viewer hope, her sense of humor grows affection for Kuniko, her highs giving her lows a devastating weight. I'd love for Tanaka's work to be more often discussed in conversations about great post-war Japanese cinema, and watching this is a really good way to start doing that. It's streaming now on the Criterion channel. Wow, what is there to say about the Mafu Cage other than that it's genuinely one of the craziest movies I've ever seen? Lee Grant and Carol Kane play sisters named Ellen and Sissy, respectively, who grew up in Africa where their father worked as an anthropologist. Sissy, unable to take care of herself, now lives with Ellen and spends most of her time playing with pet monkeys, at least until she has one of her uncontrollable violent outbursts and kills them. Ellen's life consists basically of going to work as an astronomer, securing new monkeys and apes for Sissy, dealing with her hysterics, and also, I guess, having a weirdly incestuous relationship with her. I don't know, man. This movie. Everything spins out of control when Ellen falls for a man at work who pushes to learn more about her personal life, which I think we all know will not work out for him. Really, I could have picked either Lee Grant or Carol Kane to highlight in this film. This is such a fascinating entry in Grant's late 70s foray into low-budget horror. But Kane clearly has a much more showy role here, and she isn't shy about making it as wacky as possible. Kane has such an airy quality that she employs in really different ways. She often uses it for comedy, but here it reads quite spooky. Breeziness as vacancy. No logic, all emotion, all reaction. She shifts back and forth between giddy, childlike innocence and horrid tantrums, screaming, crying, beating anything that stands between her and her desires. Kane really can do anything. Just consider that in the space of a few short years, she did Hester Street, this, and played the perfect comic opposite to Gene Wilder in The World's Greatest Lover. There's so much more to explore with her varied career, but the Mafu Cage is not to be missed, not only for her insane performance, but also because this film is genuinely outrageous and surprising, great for a night when you're looking for shock and awe. There's no violence toward animals explicitly shown in this film, but I might suggest skipping it if the suggestion of that bothers you. You can watch it right now for free on YouTube. If you follow me on social media, you probably know that nothing brings me more joy than Isabella Rossellini's farm content.
This is the beautiful fleece from my sheep, my favorite one. She's a heritage breed, Lincoln long hair. Look at that. I can make a wig.
I am just obsessed by the idea of this woman. Infamous from birth, the most beautiful person in the world, has a wacky film career making strange little art films, decides actually she just wants to study animal sciences, and now she has this farm and educates people and still occasionally shows up to stop the show. She is a treasure who has truly never gotten enough credit for being an incredible artist on her own merits. A great place to start doing that is with the saddest music in the world. The film takes place during the Great Depression in Canada. Beer baroness Lady Helen Port Huntley announces that she is running a Eurovision-esque competition in which each country will send a musical representative who will compete to determine who has the saddest music in the world. Chester Kent is the American representative, and he thinks he has a chance to win because his family has a close relationship with Lady Port Huntley. Both he and his father had affairs with her. In fact, it's his father's fault that her legs were amputated, a fact he tries to remedy by building her glass, beer-filled legs. Chester's brother, who left the country, enters the contest for Serbia, playing a painful song about his dead son. They plot, tease, deceive, and romance each other in a wild ride that ends with a real bang. To me, Rossellini's collaborations with director Guy Maddin work so well because I think he deploys her in similar ways to how she writes for herself. Where other directors might pigeonhole her for her looks or European exoticism, Madden just wants to match her freak. He wants her to be as theatrical, outrageous, and frankly as funny as her performances in her green porno films are. There's a reason, for example, that the short film she made to celebrate her father's 100th birthday was a collaboration with Guy Madden, whose surrealist work so expertly echoes the filmmaking of the early 20th century. In the saddest music in the world, she's aggressive, horny, overly confident, gaudy. She thinks she rules the roost, and for a while she does, at least until her vanity gets a hold of her. Lady Port Huntley is such a parody of a rich person, sporting her fox furs and her tiara, taking her champagne and milk bath. So Rossellini plays her in an appropriately campy manner, always in a huff or batting her eyelashes, on the hunt for whatever she wants, be it attention or profits. This is such a seductive, domineering performance that ranks among her best. I have to confess I've been in a giallo mood as of late. Like after the election, I've basically only wanted to watch horror, and mostly Italian horror at that. I'll let you psychoanalyze for yourself why that is, but anyway, watching giallo means you're usually going to cross paths with Dario Argento, which means you're also probably going to cross paths with his wife, collaborator, inspiration, scream queen, Daria Nicolodi. I'm convinced Daria Nicolodi is one of the coolest people of all time. I mean, look at her. And she's not just a great actress, but also, unsurprisingly, a major reason Argento's movies work at all. She co-wrote Suspiria and Inferno, and obviously had to fight for on-screen credit. She introduced him to the band Goblin, whose music gave his films such a legendary flavor. And of course, she acts the hell out of all of her roles in his films. Obviously, I was tempted to put one of their collaborations on this list, probably Deep Red, but I really wanted to include a performance that is not dubbed in English, as many of those available in the US are, because although her physical work is detailed and interesting enough to make even those dubbed performances stand out as special, I love her speaking voice, and I wanted to highlight it. I went with Property is No Longer a Theft, a film about a young bank teller who is literally allergic to money and becomes resentful of all the wealthy customers who come into his bank. He decides to turn full-time to theft instead, stalking a butcher who he believes represents all of the ills of capitalism, and eventually steals everything in his life, including his mistress, Anita, played by Daria Nicolodi. The director of this film, Elio Petri, was known for his social satires from a leftist perspective. This film has a lot of good ideas that I'm not sure are followed up on in a convincing or satisfying way, but it's at least consistent in how it portrays Anita. She is resigned to playing her role in this rich man's life. She boosts his ego, she withstands constant fondling and objectification, all in the service of survival. What really makes this role and this performance work for me is this monologue in which Anita describes her life as an object, finding dark humor and irony in it. Her performance of it is stunning. One take, straight to camera, detailed, cool, a shift of the eyes, or this twitch right here. This alone is worth the price of admission. And if, or when, the rest of the film bores you, just watch Deep Red. Victims of Sin can scratch a lot of itches for a cinephile. It's a gritty film noir, it's a teary maternal melodrama, Afro-Caribbean music serves as its propulsive heartbeat, and dancing along is a powerhouse rumbera who will sweep you off your feet. Rodolfo is an underworld figure, the gangster owner of a nightclub. When one of the women in his entourage has a baby, he orders her to dispose of it if she wants to remain in his company. When she does, one of the dancers at his club, Violetta, played by Ninon Sevilla, rushes to save the baby and raise him as her own. She leaves for another club, but having lost his prize dancer, Rodolfo continues to be a problem for years to come. Obviously, since this film was made in 1951, it feels quite similar to a lot of US American films you might have seen from around the same era. But there are so many differences too that really highlight how particular Hollywood was about certain tropes and stylistic decisions. For one thing, the troubles women experience within a patriarchal society are much more explicit. But much like Girls in the Night, I really appreciated how this film depicts female community. The women and victims of sin are definitely going through it, but they always support each other, defending one another from physical violence, helping raise each other's children, arguing with bad bosses on each other's behalf. Another thing to note specifically as it relates to Sevilla, sure, you will see Rita Hayworth or Barbara Stanwyck or whoever play dancers in noirish melodramas in the US, but you will never see them dance like Nino and Sevilla does in this film. She is absolutely electric, just a rhythmic bomb going off on the dance floor. The showstopper is probably this scene, which is an audition of sorts, in which she seeks to prove to her new employer that she's definitely a headliner. The routine is all percussion, no horns to carry the tune. This is just the beat and her, and eventually a drummer who joins in on the party. The two dance around each other in an enchanting call and response. Nicknamed the Golden Venus of the Golden Age, Sophia actually was offered Hollywood contracts but refused them. And good for her, honestly. I can only imagine the ways they'd try to flatten her out here. Overall, this is a very entertaining film that will pull on your heartstrings. It's on YouTube and in a much higher quality on the Criterion channel. So I wanted to watch something with Maria Callas that had nothing to do with Pablo Larraín, so I decided to finally pull the trigger and watch Medea. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. There's a stereotype that opera singers aren't the best actors, and I knew there was no singing in this film, meaning that her performance couldn't rely on what is far and away her most famous and bankable skill set. That said, this is La Callas we're talking about, a generational talent and diva of the highest magnitude. I'm happy to report that's exactly what you get in this film.
Well, first of all, as a technician, she's magnificent. As an actress, there's no word to describe her. And just her magnetism, she could sing a poor performance. I've never had an occasion to hear it, but she could, and she would still be just as magnetic as ever. This woman is just amazing.
Medea is Italian director Pier Paolo Pasolini's retelling of both the Euripides play of the same name and the Jason and the Argonauts myth. I had some trouble with the pacing of this film, and if the Letterboxd reviews are any indication, I'm not alone in that. It can be slow, the plot is not always clearly delineated, there's minimal dialogue, but I found the film transfixing nonetheless. Pasolini builds a colorful, otherworldly ancient space for these myths to take shape. Breathtaking locations, beautiful costumes, and it's Pasolini, so he's going to make everyone look as gorgeous as those costumes and locations deserve. Callas in particular is filmed like a goddess. Her flowing hair, extravagant makeup, towering headpieces, and ornate jewelry. Most of her performance is filmed in a close-up, which to me makes it all the more remarkable. This is an artist whose stock in trade was belting to the back of the house, making emotions as big and readable as possible. Callas could infuse those big performances with nuance on stage, but here on the screen, she does it with the smallest details. Each expression carries 1,000 different feelings: perverse excitement, post-conjugal regret, madness, determination. The version of this film on the Criterion channel and the highest quality rip on YouTube are both Italian dubs. There is an English version on YouTube, and although the quality is borderline unwatchable, I'd recommend at least scrolling through it for key scenes to hear how she delivers her own dialogue. It really only adds to the experience. She's as commanding and expressive as you'd expect her to be. This is Maria Callas's only film, and I can only resent this performance for teasing me with what could have been if other directors had taken a chance or if things had been different. Diana Ross had a short but vibrant film career. Of that great trio of films she made in the 1970s, Lady Sings the Blues, Mahogany, and The Wiz, Mahogany is probably the most overlooked of the three. And that's probably fair in all honesty, given that Lady Sings the Blues earned her an Oscar nomination and that The Wiz is culturally iconic in its own right. But Mahogany has a lot of value too, both as a cinematic experience and in understanding Ross's fame as both a singer and an actress. Here she plays Tracy Chambers, an aspiring fashion designer who works in a low-level job at a department store in Chicago. One day, a famous photographer, Anthony Perkins showing up again, spots her during a shoot at her store and realizes her potential. He transforms her from Tracy into Mahogany, one of the most in-demand models in the world. Eventually, she uses this fame to pursue her dreams as a designer, but comes to realize that the fashion world may be more vapid and unfulfilling than she'd hoped. Will she learn to love her new life of glamour and excess? Or will she return to her man back in Chicago, the ever-charming Billy D. Williams, playing an activist fighting against gentrification? Diana Ross will always be first and foremost a music superstar, but this film really highlights how she truly is the full package. She's an ingenue who has unbeatable chemistry with Williams, a gorgeous woman who can wear the hell out of anything, and an actress who isn't afraid to embody the ugly parts of personhood. Mahogany might be best remembered for its theme, sung of course by Ross, which peaked at number 1 on the Billboard charts, and was nominated for the Best Original Song Oscar. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because of a video I've been working on for over a month now that will be coming out soon. Pop music and the film industry intertwine with each other in so many ways. One way that I've really enjoyed looking at how they overlap is through the music video. Of course, references to classic film pop up all the time, but have you ever considered how those films actually influenced the form of the music video? Polyphonics, How Old Hollywood Shaped the Music Video, is a really fascinating exploration of some of the topics I'll be talking about in that upcoming video. For example, that the standards Ginger Rogers and Judy Garland performed on the big screen were the pop hits of their time, as well as an in-depth look at how the music industry took advantage of a hugely popular visual medium while struggling to stay afloat during the Great Depression. Polyphonic comes at it from the perspective of the music industry, which isn't usually the angle I come from, so I found it really interesting. And you can watch it right now, ad-free, on Nebula. As you may already know, I'm a proud member of the Nebula family, which means that all of the videos I've made for YouTube are also currently streaming ad-free on Nebula, and everything I make in the future will be too. I love working with Nebula because it's not some soulless tech company, it's creator-founded and creator-led, meaning creators are encouraged to take risks and make things that they want to make without worrying about whether the algorithm they have no control over will bless them with a good spot on people's homepages or not. And Nebula is not just great for creators, it's great for the audience as well. Subscribers get unique originals they can't get anywhere else, like Maggie Mae Fish's series Unrated. Creators will often drop videos on Nebula before they publish them on YouTube. Polyphonic did that with his video. And best of all, it's ad-free. Everything on Nebula is paid for with subscriptions, so signing up for the platform supports my channel tremendously, as well as an entire community of creators. It's the holiday season, so of course Nebula has a few deals that you might be interested in. If you know someone who you think might enjoy Nebula but hasn't taken the plunge yet, great news. Nebula is currently offering gift cards, meaning you can gift 1 year of Nebula to a friend for just $36. Gift cards can also work for current subscribers too. They'd get a free year added to their balance and wouldn't be charged for that year. And if you're sitting there like, man, I don't even know what my Nebula subscription is, wouldn't it be great to just not worry about renewing it and all of that? Well, they have something for you too. Nebula is also offering lifetime memberships. For one-time $300 fee, you get lifetime access to everything on the streaming service for as long as Nebula exists. You never have to think about managing your subscription again. Every new episode, premiere, series, and class will be instantly at your fingertips forever. So head on over to nebula.tv/BeKindRewind by clicking the link in my description to sign up now, or head over to gift.nebula.tv/BeKindRewind to give a year of Nebula to a friend for just $36.